Well, we knew that the NFL was investigating more players for gambling, whether it was gambling on sports, gambling on football, but more specifically, and the rule that I think most of the players did not familiarize themselves with is playing any of those online games or gambling from an NFL facility. And we now find out that, Isaiah Rodgers, who we know they were investigating, that was one name that we did know. Um, it's come out that he has been suspended indefinitely, along with Rashad Berry, both of the Indianapolis Colts. Nicholas Petit-Pereira, an offensive tackle for the Tennessee Titans, has been suspended for the first six games, much like Jamison Williams here in Detroit. But the one that I do want to talk about is Isaiah Rodgers. And he was suspended for betting on football, but not only betting on football, betting on his own team, specifically a prop bet for one of their running backs. Now, it didn't specify which running back or if it was just, the running game in general. He put $1,000 on an over and under for their running game. Now, it didn't say whether he thought they were going to go over, thought they were going to go under, but he had placed a bunch of $25 bets, a bunch of $50 bets, and then all of a sudden he got flagged because, boom, here's $1,000 bet on his team.
They must have been playing the Bears that week, huh? Jonathan Taylor over 120 yards.
Yeah.
Lock it in.
And so, TJ, I'd just like to get your thoughts on the suspensions. Is gambling in the NFL, is it becoming a major issue for the fans? Because we all know it's about the integrity of the shield. Is it becoming a major issue? But let's talk about Isaiah Rodgers first.
Yeah, I don't think so. And look, I don't think this whole thing is as black and white as maybe it appears. I know you can say, hey, it's a rule, don't gamble, right? And yes, I do agree with that. And especially when it comes to your own team, right? Or when it comes to NFL, you certainly have knowledge, more knowledge being in the locker room of what's going on in the league than you do being on the outside, right? And that's not only with your own team, but that's also with other teams. You have buddies on other teams. If you really wanted to, you could figure out, who's hurt, right? Who's playing for you guys on Sunday? What's going on? What are you thinking, right? And not maybe putting two and two together, but it would be pretty easy to transfer that knowledge to somebody else around the league. So that's where it comes. When it comes to betting on the NFL games, I do think it's black and white. But when it comes to some of these other suspensions, we still haven't heard what these guys are doing to generate these 6-game suspensions. It could be anything from, sitting on a training table playing, $1 blackjack on your phone to betting on, I don't know, NBA games or hockey or baseball, whatever
college
it is.
Football.
That I don't have an issue with. Like that to me is, you look at that 6-game suspension and you're like, man, that is really, it doesn't seem like the punishment fits the crime. You know what I mean? It seems very excessive. But I think the NFL is in a bind right now that they feel like they have to make these penalties excessive. They have to make it a point of emphasis to these guys that if you get caught doing it, no matter how small it is, no matter if you put a 50-cent bet down, if you did it from the facility, or if you did it from the stadium, or if you did it from, the team hotel, you're going to be punished, and you're going to be punished very harshly. And I think that's just the NFL's way of saying, we got to try to get out in front of this thing to make sure it doesn't become an issue that fans are starting to wonder, that's kind of weird. There was a guy, Jonathan Jones, I think a defensive back for the Patriots, said last week, he was like, why? I'm putting my body on the line. I'm basically risking my health to go out there and try to win a game, but I can't bet, $100 on my team to win a game. And that, when you think about it, there's some people that are like, well, it's in the integrity of the game, right? It doesn't matter. You can't bet. You're not talking like point spread here. You're not talking, hey, we're going to win by less than 10 or more than 10. You know what I mean? That might give you a different, that might call integrity into the question. But if you're just talking about, hey, I'm going to put $5 on my team's money line to win, you're already trying to win the game anyways. So where does that affect the integrity of what you're already trying to accomplish? You know what I mean? But with that being said, I don't think that they should start allowing players to do that. I do think that starts getting in a dicey area.
Yeah.
We obviously know the big one is, hey, if you're betting on your team to lose, right, you have a direct, correlation to that. But I mean, this goes back just decades, right? I mean, the whole Pete Rose scandal, when it turned out he was betting on his teams to win. You know what I mean? And it's like, is that really a bad thing? He's already trying to win the game anyways. I don't know. I think it is getting a little bit more gray than what it just appears. The bottom line is, for me though, as a player, it's very clear what you can and cannot do. You know what I mean? And I think from here going forward, it's like this is the first round of guys that got busted, right? These are things that happened probably 6 months ago, 8 months ago, that just took this long to investigate. From here going forward, it's like, if you're a guy that gets suspended, if you're in the next round of suspensions, if you're a guy
really
that's not getting the point, like the point's just not getting across to you, you're a really dumbass. You're just an idiot. You know what I mean? Because right now, as soon as that news came out about Jameson Williams, a couple months ago, and all those other guys, and even Calvin Ridley, the year before that, if you were a player that was dabbling in any of this stuff, the first thing you should have done was delete every one of those accounts from your phone,
and
from your computer, from
out.
Anything, and just say, you know what, like, I didn't know I was, breaking the rules at the time. Now I see what they're doing. Just cut it. Just don't do it. You know what I mean? If you get caught doing something, the punishment is going to be so severe. Is it really worth risking a $50 bet or really even $1,000 bet for some of these guys? It's not worth it. So just, stay away from it.
Now, here's where I agree that there are some gray areas. If you're betting on NBA games, if you're betting on Major League Baseball, if you're doing all of that stuff and you're a football player, you ask the question, well, how is that bad? Well, here's where I think it becomes an issue. Is you start to allow those entities, whether it's either onto your phone or in the facility. And it's been reported by a number of different news sources. The one that I have that I'm looking at, it's NBC Sports, has, per a league source with knowledge of the situation, one NFL player lost $8 million last season through gambling in 2022. So when I say you allow these entities into these facilities, you can't tell me that somebody, and I don't know, it doesn't say what player, what team, what city, or what sports book. As soon as these guys or entities, let's just say, identify that there's a player that lost $8 million, you don't think that there's going to be a phone call made that says, hey, you want to make that money back? And if whether it's lost on any sport, if it's lost on basketball, all of a sudden they get a football player in the most popular sport in America, most bet on sport, and all of a sudden, they've got an inroads to somebody that's lost $8 million. They're trying to make back that loss. They say, hey, we got to wait for you to make that back. Yeah. All right. Instead of, offensive player, defense player, whatever it is, instead of losing by 10 points, would really be best if you guys only lost by, less than 9. And now you've got a player in the mix that's looking to shave points or to determine the outcome. Not that one individual could do it. Like, it's a tall task to even score points in the NFL or stop scoring points in the NFL. But if you've got somebody on the inside, now all of a sudden maybe they go to their buddy and say, hey, I really need this. All right, you got to help me out. We still want to win the game, but we can only lose by a maximum of 9 points. We got to figure out how to do this.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you start looking at the integrity of the NFL, of these players, and of the game, because sports gambling has become it's always been a big business. It's even more so now because it's legal in so many states to do it from the comfort of your own phone. And now you're trying to figure out, how do I make this happen? How do I recover these losses? That's where, and maybe a player wouldn't do that, but I don't want to find out.
Yeah, no, I don't think anybody does. And I think that's why the NFL is trying to be so severe with the punishment to hopefully keep guys from putting themselves in that position. Now, we heard that story come out a couple weeks ago about, unnamed player losing $8 million. And it's like, immediately I start trying to do some, digging, and I'm trying to, call some contacts. I'm calling some people, and I'm like, hey, you hear anything about this? And nobody that I talked
I
to
know.
knew who it was or what happened, but there was like 2 people that were like, oh, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. And I was like, holy cow, man. Like that's almost unheard of. But like you said, I think that's why the NFL is just trying to make the punishment so harsh. You know what I mean? Just to try to scare guys away, to say it's not worth it. You're going to be suspended for at least a year if you're doing it on football games. And if you're doing anything else, you're still going to be suspended for what? A third of the season, So,
Do you think they'll go as far as trying to regulate what players are doing on airplanes? Because you and I have both seen it. Playing cards, all right, it's as old as time.
Yeah.
And
they try to tell you every single year. You know what I mean? I think it's kind of like an unwritten rule. Like it's just well known that players are going to gamble. Players are, whether you're playing backgammon in the locker room, whether you're playing spades or euchre or whatever it is on the airplane, there's always going to be a little bit something involved in that, right? And they try to tell you every year. I can't remember, but it's like, you can't do anything more than like a $50 pot, let's just say, right? John, we've both seen pots way larger than that in some of the games, right? But that to me is why police it when it's really not an issue? I mean, it doesn't bring, you might piss off a teammate once in a while, if you take some money, but I think that's just kind of the known just the way that everything works in a locker room, the way things work, and it's just the atmosphere, right? You're going to be around that. The coaches don't really want to know, but
they know.
You play,
especially when you have former players as coaches.
You get guys, howling and growling back there, and you know what's going on. But that's totally different than this whole conversation about sports gambling.
There's a difference between buddies playing cards, which happens around the world on a regular basis. Dudes have poker night, right? And for a lot of NFL teammates, I'm sure it happens the same thing on NBA, Major League Baseball teams. When you travel, you're playing cards. And that to me that's a self-regulation. That's where players, leaders on the team got to determine, all right, this is getting a little bit out of hand. We need to back off. It's starting to affect our team morale because it can. If you lose, and we've heard stories of guys losing 10, 15, 20 grand on an airplane ride, that can affect team morale. That's where your team leader's got to step in, or if a coach hears that, he's got to step in and say, hey, either the pots stay low or we're gonna nix this. We can't have it because we can't have it affecting the outcome of games or affecting the way that we're going to operate together at the practice facility.
Yeah, you can't have Jimmy all pissed off because he lost 20 grand. Now it's affecting him on Sunday. You know what I mean? Exactly. Like that starts to get. But this goes back to kind of the what I was talking about with Jonathan Jones's quote was, like I play golf. Right. I don't know. You don't play much golf, but you like fishing, right? I don't know if you do fishing tournaments.
Oh, sure.
If you go out, one-on-one, me and you, John, and I say
big fish,
$100, whoever catches the most fish.
Yeah.
Does that affect the integrity of our fishing competition? You're already trying to catch more fish than me. I'm already trying to catch more fish than you. You know what I mean? When you talk about
it doesn't.
When you talk about trying to. This is what Jonathan Jones was trying to say, I think. If I put $100 on my team's just money line to win, we're already trying to do that anyways, right? Now it would be different if, John, you said, hey, I'll give you a 5-fish handicap because I'm a terrible fisherman. And you happen to say, I'll take the under. I bet I beat you by 5 or less. That would affect integrity because now you might have a 4-fish head start and you might just start releasing them. No, I didn't catch one, right? You know what I mean? So it's like I play golf all the time and it's like, you play $50 matches, right? Head to head, me versus you, better score wins. That doesn't affect the integrity of that game. We're already trying to beat each other anyways.
Where it changes though is when other people outside of you and I, if other people were to bet on us fishing and say, hey, I'm going to bet more, I'm going to bet the over or whatever it is. I'm betting on myself. Now all of a sudden you have all of this outside ears of, hey, I'm going to put, $100 on TJ. I'm going to put $5 on John. I'm going to do all of this other things. And then there is always going to be that outside influence of, hey, there's more money on TJ. If I can get a cut of that, if I only put $100 on myself, but I can get a cut of that money if I lose, somebody comes and says, hey, I'm gonna put $1,000 on him. I'll give you $150 if you throw this. Now all of a sudden that changes it. Even though I put money on myself, I can get more by losing. That's where I think the NFL is really concerned, is not that guys are going to do anything but bet on themselves. It's what we do. We bet on ourselves. We go to free agency. That's a bet on yourself. But when other people are putting money on it and betting and, trusting that the outcome of the game is going to be based on the merits of the team and the execution on the field, that's where you cannot have an inroad to, I'm betting on myself, you're betting on yourself. It leaves itself open for somebody to come in and somehow compromise that situation.
Yeah, but that's a possibility whether me and you are betting on ourselves anyways, right? You could be a guy that just never bets anything. You could get approached out of nowhere and you know what I mean? So
but
that's
you
a
don't want to have that
possibility whether
inroad.
players are betting anyways.
But you don't want to have that inroad.
No, I get that. And look, I think that when you talk about the guy supposedly who lost $8 million, you would think that'd be pretty easy to track. First of all, like if that
well, if they're going to get
Jameson
Jameson Williams or they're going to get some of these other guys for betting on blackjack on the training room table, yeah, you'd think it would be somewhat easy to find out who lost $8 million.
Yeah, so that's where I kind of pause when I hear that story a little bit. It kind of came out and then it went away, right?
Yeah, we haven't heard
it's like, I don't
anybody
know. Maybe
identified.
You're right. Maybe it's puffed up a little bit, but no, I think you know what, in today's world, honestly, like I think it's so difficult for people to have access to players. You know what I mean? Like you hear stories all the time about, the White Sox from the 1930s, right? And all these guys that were doing all the cheating scandals. And even, in college basketball back in the 80s, these guys are getting approached by people that they don't know because they're out at, you know what I mean? Like it was just easier to have access to players, I think, back in that time. And at the time, players weren't making nearly the kind of money that, you're talking about in professional sports nowadays. I think if that ever starts to become a problem, where you talk about outside influence and people trying to skew the results of games to try to put money in somebody's pocket, it'll probably start at an amateur level first. So I think, NCAA, I think you would have to be very careful of monitoring and policing what's going on there, because now you're talking about amateur athletes, right? You go to an NFL player and you say, I'll give you 10 grand, 50 grand, whatever it is to blow this game. You're going to have a hard time finding somebody to do that. These guys are already making a shit ton of money. You go to a college kid that's not making anything and say, I give you 10 grand, 20 grand to blow this game. That's where it might start to affect the integrity of the game a little bit. So as long as it doesn't happen at that level, I think professional sports should be safe, at least for the foreseeable future.
Calvin Ridley was suspended for a year, is now back, was originally with the Atlanta Falcons, is now with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't know if Isaiah Rodgers comes back. I don't know if Quintus Cephas. I don't know if some of these other guys who have received these, indefinite bans will be back. But, this is something that's as old as time in regards to, if you're really good, chances are people are going to eventually accept you back.
They're going to forgive you.
How much does this hang over Calvin Ridley? How much if Isaiah Rodgers is let back in the NFL, especially since Calvin Ridley didn't bet on the Atlanta Falcons. He bet on the NFL, but not on his team. Isaiah Rodgers did. Do you think we'll ever see Isaiah Rodgers back in the NFL?
I don't think it matters what they bet on. Like you said, though, if you're good enough, teams are going to find a way to forgive you, right? And even like today, when I hear Calvin Ridley's name, I don't think, some cheater. Oh, this guy was, whatever. I don't have that negative portrayal in my head.
I
think Calvin Ridley, and I think damn good receiver, made a stupid mistake, but whatever. He got punished for it, But I don't put a negative label on him. Unfortunately for guys like Isaiah Rodgers,
he might not be good enough to put up with
that. Right. Nobody really knows you in the first place outside Indianapolis. People are going to remember what he did because this is the most we've ever heard his name before. You know what I mean? You hear Calvin Ridley's name, you think damn good receiver, you think all the plays he made,
Alabama.
Right? Yeah, you think Isaiah Rodgers, and you're like, oh, the gambling guy, the guy who bet on his own team. You know what I mean? So unfortunately, that's going to carry, it's probably for him the rest of his career. If he does get another chance, that's what he's ultimately going to be connected with. And even guys like Quintus Cephas, probably going to get connected with that. Guys like, and there was another guy in that list, the most recent list, that was Demetrius Taylor. He was a free agent, but he was a defensive tackle, an undrafted guy that was with the Lions last year throughout training camp. Spent some time on the practice squad. I
Yep.
think Lions fans, the diehard ones, might remember him a little bit. He made some plays last year in the preseason and was kind of around a little bit. But those guys, I'm not surprised we haven't heard any like really big names be on any of these lists or be under investigation or be suspended or anything.
Other than
Jameson Williams probably the biggest one, but you know what I mean? You're not hearing like quarterbacks. You're not hearing,
right.
Pro Bowl type guys. You're not really hearing those type of guys because those are generally the dudes that make good decisions, right? A guy like Jameson Williams is going to come back, right? I don't think anybody's going to look at a Jameson Williams and say, oh, that guy was a cheater. He's a gambler, right? He's a degenerate. No, he made a mistake. He got punished, severely punished for it, which that's a whole different conversation. But I don't think that's a tag that's going to follow him along either, because I think we all know, at least we all hope, he's going to turn into a pretty damn good player. And maybe 2-3 years from now, nobody even really remembers this whole little blip on the radar.
4 weeks from the start of training camp. We are inching ever so close to the 2023 football season. Can't wait to get there. We're going to talk about deserving fan bases next week. We got a lot to get to before we get to the regular season, so make sure you stay tuned here for all your Lions information. Anything going around the NFL that is important, we'll talk about on Necessary Roughness.